Hello, everyone, dear organizing committee, professors, scholars, researchers, and students, and all participants of this conference. I'm very happy to be here among you in this insightful get together. Well, when I was asked to explore environment in the Islamic mysticism, I was really thrilled because the theme was very well chosen. You know, examining environment in a culture that still lives with mysticism is quite fascinating. So on behalf of the Center of Excellence at the University of Isfahan, we will explore environment in the first mystical tradition. So we will begin with two key questions. To what extent does this culture address ecology, and to what extent the poets and writers paid attention to nature? To answer the first question, we have to say that over the past century, that literary research has developed and academic writing has progressed, nature has been given very little attention. So attention to nature has been quite minimal, and it's the kind of research topic that we might focus on. So what about the studies? Let's take a close look. As you see, uh, sorry, scholarship on the topic has begun more significantly in the past decade. Oh, sir, I hear noises. Is it mine? Okay. But okay. Uh, but the focus on nature has been very limited. The reason is that the concept of nature and the theme has not been a part of our cultural discourse until recently. So the discussions on the themes like solar power or preserving the nature just came about and appeared only 10 days, 10 years ago. So when the government, policymakers, and society do not pay attention to nature, research and literature don't either. So what about the poets and writers in the past? Because they were researchers and they were the scholars. What about the researcher? What about the writers and poets? When we see the history of writing and poetry, especially, we see that in different literary schools, they paid attention to nature, yes, but nature was not in their first and primary importance. They refer to nature as a kind of tool to express their thoughts, emotions, even political points of views. For instance, if a poet referred to a tree, they were referring to their lover. If they referred to flowers and rivers, they were referring to their kind of love, patriotism, or even a kind of warning to the kings. Another perspective is that at that moment, when, for example, Khorasani Literary School appeared, I have got a note. Okay, so I might turn off my camera. So would you tell me from uh, which slide I wasn't audible so that is it from the beginning? Would someone help me when? Okay, so am I audible now? I hear myself. Okay, great. So as we said during the history of writing, thank you everyone. Uh, Poets and writers refer to nature, but it was a kind of tool to express their ideas, thoughts, and views. Also, we have in their works that they refer to, for example, not collecting seashells, because they were referring to spiritual growth or spiritual uplifting. They didn't mean to preserve the nature. We will explore this into more details later. Even in contemporary poetry, when Sohrab Sepehri says, "آب را گل نکنیم," or "let's not muddy the water," he is using water in a case that is symbolic, not referring to nature itself. So nature isn't a philosophical thing, but rather a kind of uh, a mean, as a mean or as a tool to express their ideas. So what we do is to explore the scholarship in environmental studies into more details and how they pay attention to Islamic thought and mystical thought. And we will explore the topics in their debates, which is in 7 stages. And then we will shift back to the history of Islamic mysticism, the principles and the factors that influence their worldview about nature and how they use nature in their work. Then we will have some projections and insights into the future of this topic. We'll again look at the graph. As the graph shows, environmental studies in our culture begins in 1994. Let me check if I'm audible. Yeah, good. So it begins in 1994. But as we know, just environmental studies in 1970.
Shall I share the screen? Sure.
I'm sorry.
Shall we start now? If you can share,
Excuse me, the echo is coming from Shashikala ma'am's account.
I'm sorry. Okay. So, the discussion and the discourse in environmental studies began in 1970s in the world, but were received it 2 decades later in 1994. But as soon as it appeared in our culture, discussions in Islamic thought and Islamic mysticism and also environmental studies appeared at that moment. As you see on the graph, we have stopped working on the topic since few years ago, but international discourse is going to give rise to that topic. So the future is very difficult to predict. Maybe with the discussions and theories in sustainable development would continue, and our discussions in Islamic mysticism and environmental studies would do so. However, based on the huge gap that we will see, maybe the topic would stop and environmental studies or environmental reading of those books would continue. Uh, to move forward, we have to see what kind of topics they really explored. Since 1994 to the present, we'll see 7 key stages. First, they were concerned with how policymakers refer to nature, how they see it. And what in the second period, we'd see the importance of economical changes, I don't know, how they should pay attention to ethics and everything in order to overcome challenges in preserving the nature, for preserving the nature. In the third period, they were really concerned about how they can use different implications from their own Islamic background or even their governmental or policy makings, governmental decision or policy makings to change everything. The fourth phase is quite utopian, they are looking forward some implications from other parts of the world to find some solutions and live a better world. Then, in doing so, they move to the theories that are happening and emerging in the world. So they use existing models, they work on it. But the sixth and seventh phase continue to the present. They study Islamic countries and European models to see how they face environmental issues. And they are looking for some solutions in the workspace, how they can use some strategies in order to preserve their own nature. Now, we have to just look at the piece again. As I said, since the past decade, the discussions and the original studies and solutions are just emerging. So the topic is quite new for us. Why? We have to see. When we look back, we have to see that most of our culture and writings are based on mystical works. We need a few things to consider when you're looking at nature of mysticism. The history of mysticism based on the theory of Sunnati Irfani, or as translated as mystical traditions, also previously known as practical and theoretical mysticism, is a study. We see two periods of differences in writings. From the 2nd to the 7th century AH, we see authors are focused on the relationship between human and heavens, the divine. So here they don't pay attention to existence, or what Heidegger says as existence, we call it in Iran. They refer to the existence of something, not the beings. So the first period is about the relationship between human and the divine. So nature appears in this phase. In the next phase, when you are focused on existence, they are not focused on nature. So we don't see implications of natural elements or descriptions in the works that come forward. The next thing that we need to consider is that at that moment, from the 2nd century to the 7th century, oral transmission of literature has been quite important for them. So they had to talk to the people. To talk to the people, they had to use something that could be a shared point of reference. They used natural elements in order to share their own thoughts and feelings and worldviews. It could be something that their rivals, their lovers, their audience could understand and refer to. The other point is that at that moment, the classical worldview, traditional idea was that we are human beings who are conquering nature. So we can do anything with the nature and we don't care about the generation that comes forward. So that's why that in the first period, it did so much destruction to the nature. They wanted to do everything to meet their own needs. The other point is that at that moment, they really didn't care about sustainability. The first point is that they were not concerned with, scientific innovations and debates. They didn't have skyscrapers to engage with. They were engaged with their own problems and solutions in their society and the neighboring countries. The other idea that comes here is that they had to just think about their own developments. For instance, after the invasions, they were really concerned about how environment is changing their own relationships and everything. But before that, no, not much attention is given to that. So that's why that in the first period, which is the core topic, we have 5 topics explored. They use nature as a form of for rhetorical purposes. They use it as a literary device. They use it for esoteric interpretation. You know that we've got exoteric and esoteric interpretation. We call them ta'wil. Um, so they had to look at nature and see what it means for them, or what is the sign of that natural element for their life and the spiritual growth. At that moment, they also used some natural elements and herbs and different things to teach people how to behave in the society, how they encounter with the world. The other one was how they shaped their own anthology or cosmology of mysticism. So in order to be united, they had their own ideas during specific periods. We will explore them into details. And more specifically, they use nature as a that help them for mystical wayfaring. They had to use it for external journey. They use it to go through the nature, enjoy their time, and then they will have a spiritual wayfaring. So we have to here bear in mind that someone who changed the ideas from the 7th century onwards was Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi was quite familiar with Christianity because her mother and family lived in a place that they were Christians. So the ideas were influenced by different interpretations of different, you know, religious ideas. Let's see. Um, I brought here some examples. Of course, there are a lot. For example, they refer to Bahar or spring. They refer to moon and the sun in order to refer to their or person they love. For example, in the poetry, when it says "Bahar man rukh o bud o dur mandam az o," it means that there is a reference to the lover, huh? And here we have to bear in mind that referring to the changes of the seasons, transformations, refer to their own feelings. If, for example, it's autumn, but they see their beloved, they're referred to as spring. Or some of the images are repetitive. They always refer to cloths as bleeding eyes, or tears. It say at times like a cloud. گاه چون ابر اشک خونین میفشاند گاه دست از جان شیرین میفشاند. So here again we see in different poetry of the 2nd to the 7th century that they refer to clouds. Again, we have to bear in mind that heavens and everything were for them. They studied astrology, so they were really good ideas. Or they use comparative ideas in order to say that they are very limited, but the heavens are quite, expanded. For example, they say, فکر و اندیشه است مثل ناودان وحی و مکشوف است ابر و آسمان. It means that my thoughts are very limited and narrow, but when it comes to heavenly or manning, you can describe it. So rhetorical purpose, there are a lot of references in these works. Even when we discuss the afterworld, they are using these natural elements so much. The other thing is the esoteric interpretation. As I told you, they refer to nature as the book of God. So it's a book that has different signs, and each sign has a different image message. They wanted to see what kind of mirror it is. I've brought you two examples here, which I love myself a lot. The first one is the matter of a meal, and the other one is about the water and oil. And let's see the example and go into the details. It says, میدانید که این آسیا چه میگوید سفر در خود میکنی تا هر چه نباید از خود دور کنی. Where it means, do you know what this meal is saying? It says, you circle around your name must be discarded. So as you know, in mystical wayfaring, you have to first purify yourself from different vices, huh? They were using what they had been seeing in order to convey their own spiritual elements. Or what is repetitive in their ideas is the reference to water and oil. Always we see that there is a discussion between these two and dialogues happening in resbox. For example, it says, آب گفت من از تو عزیزتر فاضلتر و حیات تو و همه چیز به من است. Or water said, I'm more precious and virtuous than you, for your life and all things depend on you. And the oil responds that because I have endured great suffering, which you have never known. So they are going to go through a discussion and says, you, despite this, I burn within my own essence and give light to mankind. You flow as you please, but if something is cast upon you, you carry out in turmoil. This is why I stand above you. So uh, that's why they are again referring to how human beings should be at peace and mercy when they come into contact with nature. So that's why they have been using nature not for its own sake and environmentalism. The other thing that I love to refer to is the story of maybe you have heard it. It's the story of a maid and a king, which occurs in the first book of Rumi's Masnavi. In here, you will see that a maid is in the desert, and the king falls in love with that maid. Then the maid is invited to go to the palace, and they live together for some time. But maid turns pale and becomes sick. So then the king understands that she is in love with another person, uh, a goldsmith. So they ask and invite the goldsmith to come and live with the girl. The girl feels happy and would be very joyful. But the king asks the practitioner to bring some herbal medicine in order to be given to the goldsmith to be killed. So that kind of love is lost. It is it doesn't have a happy end. It wants it teaches us to see the characters, how the characters can behave in different situations. Does a really emperor, does an emperor behave like this? Or should love be, absent? All of them are questions that are raised in this story. I know that in English speaking world, many are interested in this part of the poem when it says the king is a symbol of the divine majesty, the maid is the soul trapped in its own fantasy because she couldn't speak the love. The goldsmith is the word splitting gold until she sees the king, her heart stays cold. So, these stories like this always remind us how our culture has been and how it's evolving. And if we pay attention to the didactic and, it teaches us about our world in the present world. The next one is, of course, the mystical cosmology. Um, Generally, in their work, always they refer to the hierarchy of creation and classical elements by using natural elements. You know that in mysticism, they really the order of things matter to them. They know that, for example, they refer to plants and then minerals, plant, and also animals. Then they say humans have turned from animals to rational animals called humans, and then they will move to like being angels. So in this poem, which is said by Rumi as جمادی مردم و نامی شدم وزن ما مردم it's referring to the transformations that happen to the creation of the world. We have to here bear in mind that even the government uses the same hierarchy for the governance. The other thing is about the classical elements. They have something like ummahat selfie and father, which are the elements of the nature. They believe that, for example, plants that have come together and have a tribe, and that tribe is four, includes four elements. They are four major ones, like fire, soil, wind, and etc. So they say, for example, آتش عشق از کندن فتاد. Here they are referring to different classical elements. They believe that each soul should have a kind of based on these elements. We have to keep the balance between them in order to continue with the mystical wayfaring. That's about the story. We have to here also note that among all of the mystics who refer to nature, Attar and Rumi are more concerned with this idea because of their own mindset and how they were referring to natural elements in their own mystical notes. And the last point, which is the topic of our discussion, is that the matter external journey. Here I will get back to mystical wayfaring. In mystical wayfaring, we've got two stages. One of them is intrinsic, the other extrinsic. For example, if someone is going to experience mystical wayfaring, the person should be at peace with himself or herself at the first place. And then this person can go through the society and invite others. The other thing is that when you're going through the first stage, you have to go through two steps. The first one is mujahede, that is trying and making efforts. The second one is mushahede, or seeing, observation. So external journey comes to the second phase. So they say that in going to the nature is necessary for your spiritual uplifting or mystical wayfaring. You need to go to the nature and look at it. It's a type of a reflection. So says گوشم چرا مالی اگر من گوشه نان بشکنم خانه کرم گسترده ای مهمان خویشم برده ای. So the world and the nature is like a cloth full of food. You go there and you nurture yourself, and then you are prepared to receive the divine messages. So you are ready to be inspired. It says, for example, درختان بین, همه سایم, همه قایم. All of the trees are silent, but you are here to say your prayers. قبول آمد, مناجات صلاتی را. The next stage is that this person who is going through mystical wayfaring is now ready to purify the soul. So they go to the nature, they see it, reflect on it. Now they look at the signs. Each sign has a reference to a name of God. For example, it says, باغ چون زرد و خشک شد تا بخورد ز آب جان. So here they're referring to the body that is yearning for the love of the God. Here, as you see, it's more fundamental in the work. So it's that it use here in the 7th century, and also was taught by the mystics of the 6th century and previous ones. The previous thought was really concerned about that you have if you want to know yourself. In order to go through mystical wayfaring and teach others about how to do it. What about the studies now here? We said that there are readings about nature. Or there are some implications by mystics about the environment. So from this forward, we have to see if we really have this in our own works, or if we are reducing the discourse to our own text. The other thing is about the future of the idea. And this works our studies we will stick to the center that mystics gave to the study of nature. Other thing that is are there any cultures that live in mysticism and don't care about the primary importance of nature, but the secondary ones? One, how would we deal with this problem? Because today, in our region, we're facing different problems in terms of ecosystem, but uh, there is no solution found. Will our past generation and will our future generation be concerned about um, nature, and why? What will happen in the future?